Hi everybody, welcome to this second tutorial video. So what we're going to be doing today is, I'm not going to be showing you a technique with this one specifically. I'm just going to be, not going to be taking you through a technique. I'm just going to be showing you some examples of keying techniques. So we've looked at masks in the first video. What we're going to be looking at now is the idea of taking those masks and creating what we call an alpha channel. So an alpha channel is a transparent, try and imagine it as a piece of completely colorless film, and your asset is going to be on top of that film, and you can overlay it over the top of other things. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this sort of concept. We'll jump straight in, but basically what we're going to be doing today is 3 different ways of creating these an object on an alpha channel. We're going to be using color keying, rotoscoping, and Rotobrush tools. Okay, so to give you a sense of what we're looking at, first of all, let's get ourselves a nice classic green screen video. So this is me obviously in front of our green screen in the studio, and what happens effectively with color keying, first of all, is that we take out all of this green, and that positions our person, our mask if you like, and we'll come on to that in a second, on an alpha channel. So I'll do this first just to illustrate an alpha channel, and then we'll take it from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my effects and presets. Remember, you can look at the chevrons if you can't see your effects and presets tab, or go up to window and make sure that it is in fact turned on. And then you can go up here and you can go key for key light. And what I always do, you've got key light 1.2 here, but I always go for key light spill suppressor. The reason being that this comes with key light, but also adds a bit of extra as well. So I just, in case I might need it, I always drag that on. Okay, so here's key light, which is key light 1.2 anyway. And then basically what happens if you decide you need the key cleaner and spill suppressor, then when you add that, it'll add another version of key light anyway. So I always just grab that as a default, and then you've got all 3 bits altogether. So basically I've clicked on my clip, I've moved away from the project tab to the effects controls tab as normal, and what I'm going to do is the screen color that I want to get rid of, I'm going to pick up this tab and I'm going to click on some green close to the target that I want to remove. Oops, like so. Okay, and this is what's happened then, isn't it? Is that it's now taken away all those instances of green. Okay, and my asset is now on, this is what we call an alpha channel. So we can see the grey and white checkerboard background illustrates that it's a transparent background. And if we want to check that, let's just pick up, I don't know, something like a this image of the galaxy. I'll drag it underneath, and there he is. So he's going to be moving just like normal, but now he's in front of this galaxy. Obviously we've got issues with this. We can still see bits of the green involved, and the other issue, which if you're used to keying you'll probably be seeing as well, is that the asset isn't completely solid. So it's not, if you sort of zoom in, you can see that you can actually see some of the stars through him because he's gone a bit transparent. Okay, so it's not a particularly good key at this stage, but I just did that just to illustrate to you what we're trying to do. Okay, so we'll come back to color keying in a second. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to start with rotoscoping. So rotoscoping is when we were creating the mask last time, when we were making those mask shapes. But now what we're going to do is I've got a star here, and this star is going to be moving. In fact, rather than do that, let me just drag this down to make sure it's running in the same comp. There we go. Good, so that's opened up a different composition so we can actually see what we're doing. So there's our star video, okay, and this star obviously is undulating and morphing, and I've purposefully done this without any curved lines. So what we can do is a bit of rotoscoping practice if you want to give this a go. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come up to my pen tool. Okay, that icon, I'm going to show you that on in a minute. Okay, the mask feather tool, obviously we've talked about that in the masks, but you know, again, so here's the pen tool, right? And effectively what I'm going to do is I'm going to come onto my star video. Okay, I'm going to zoom in, hold down spacebar to move it around. I've got my pen tool, and I can just click. Oh, that wasn't quite accurate, was it? I can get in nice and close and click on this first point here, click down here on this junction point over here. I mean, I'm doing mine quickly. You can fettle yours a bit more if you like so, like that, and underneath, there we are, and like that, and there we go. So now what we've got is our star, and our star is on our transparent background, but of course the star is going to undulate and change, and yet our mask isn't moving. Okay, so the rotoscoping process then basically involves you looking at this movement of this star. So in order to see that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that star video down underneath it again so I can see that layer underneath. Click on the top one, though, this is the one I'm masking, and then as I move it along we can see the layer underneath, because obviously that's now on transparent. Do you see what I mean? So if I turn this base layer off, that's our reference layer, if I turn that off we can see that it's on transparent. So then as we come over the top we can see our reference layer underneath. Okay, so I'm going to move that through until that, until it stops expanding, which is about there. Okay, and I'm going to come down into my masks, open up my masks. So this is mask 1. Okay, and I'm not going to change the position yet. What I'm going to do first of all is click on the stopwatch. I should have explained that actually. I'm going to click on the stopwatch first in this first position, my apologies, and I'm going to click on mask expansion as well because I might need that a bit later on. And now I'm going to move through to that position. Okay, there we go, it's about there, isn't it? Okay, and instead of making more marks, what I can do, you see I've got my pen tool. If I've got a complete mask because I've completed it, okay, and I've effectively joined that final point back to the original, what I've now got is a complete mask, and you'll see if I bring my pen over the top I've got a plus, so I can add more points onto my mask if I want to, or again I can delete those points if I want to. So I'm going to click on this arrow so that there's no danger of me adding or deleting extra points, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up this point and I'm going to drag it so that it's overlying this first one, drag this one down, drag this one up, okay, and so on, like that. And so this is sort of elementary rotoscoping as we sort of just move this mask around. So if I turn this one off now, look what happens. Our mask now should move at a consistent pace between these two junction points, and because we know the star is moving at that consistent pace, then it's all fine. So now what we need to do is turn this one back on again, get it back to this point where it stopped moving. So it was about there, wasn't it? About like that. Okay, same sort of thing then, making sure my arrow is selected. I can pick up this point and drag it all the way up to the end, like so. I'm being quite rough with mine, but of course if you were doing this for a proper project you'd be a bit more precise by zooming in and what have you. But effectively what's happening is I'm moving these points around, and After Effects is going, oh right, I see, so you want that point to be over there at this keyframe and over here at this keyframe, you know. And effectively if I again turn that off, now I've got my star which is undulating and morphing like so. Yeah, and so you can carry on like that. Okay, and of course this is now not just creating shapes like we did in the previous one, creating masks, but this is now actually trying to use the rotoscoping technique to mask out a moving object. And of course we can also feather our edges just like we did before, so we can feather the edges of our mask if we want to and that sort of thing. Okay, bring that in a bit more like that, whatever. Okay, you know, so it doesn't have to be solid, you can do all sorts of different things with it. Okay, and then just to make the point, if we bring up our background reference video, you can see how that is now undulating and stuff over the top of our background because it's on an alpha channel. Okay, so if I refeather that back down, no feather at all, so that's just now sharp edges. Yeah, that sort of makes sense. So obviously that's rotoscoping with sharp edges. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to be rotoscoping with curved edges. So what I'm going to do now is come to my amorphous green cube thing. Okay, actually I didn't need to delete all that because I'm just going to start another composition anyway. Here's my cube, and as you can see in this one it's undulating and it's got curved edges. Now, this is useful to look at again, because obviously what you've got to do with this one, if you're going to be rotoscoping it like normal, is you're going to be clicking on your square, you're going to get your pen tool and zoom in, and you're going to click on this first point, and then what you would remember to do is to click on this point and then drag your mouse down a little bit so that it matches the curvature of the edge. Don't worry, I haven't quite got that right, but I can come back and fix it later on. I'm going to click on this bit, oops, this bit, and drag that a bit so that I've got those handles, and now I can click up to the top, drag those handles, and then I can click over here and drag those. Okay, if you are struggling to see your handles, sometimes in different compositions you can do, what you can do is you can come up to After Effects Preferences in General, and you can set the size of your Bezier handles, these are called. You can set your size of these path point handles to whatever you want. So I can set this to 20 and click OK, and now they're going to get much bigger so I can see them. As a default, After Effects comes with them at 5, so I think you'll be seeing yours at 5, like that. So nice fine handles for you to work with, you know. But yeah, it's just one of those things. So I think I just had mine set to 10 from a previous project, so I can just keep them like that. Okay, and then okay, right. So what we've got now then is, again, we take off our come away from our pen tools. We don't want that any longer. And what we're going to do is we're going to be using these handles to try and match our lines to the edge of our shape. And of course we can't see how big the shape is, so we can then come to our amorphous video and drag that underneath as our reference layer, click on the top one, and now we can try and match that to the curvature of the shape. And of course what we can do is, if you click on this point, for example, and you adjust this node, it's going to adjust both of them, which isn't what we want. So if you remember, you just hold down Command until you get this open arrow, and then just move that handle so that it lines up. So that's looking okay. Click on this one, hold down Command, move that one, and hold it down again. If you're working on a PC, I'm not sure what the equivalent key is to Command, by the way, because that's the Apple key, but I'm sure you can figure it out. There you go. So that's our mask, and if I turn that off, that's looking pretty good. Okay, but of course now what's going to happen is, as we move along, if I open this up and open up masks and turn on my properties for mask path and expansion, as we move our shape through, there we go, to get to, I don't know, let's say there. Right, so that seems to be the point, doesn't it? You're going to end up with quite a long, quite a lot of work to do in terms of then adjusting your various handles to match the shape of this. Okay, and it could take you quite a long time to really get something that you're pleased with. All right, and of course, one of the things about After Effects is we kind of try to avoid things that are going to take a long time if there's an easier way of doing it. So what we're going to do instead, so here, this is our second shape, so I'm just doing this purely to show you obviously it takes a while to get yourself to this point where you're pleased with it, but that's not looking too bad. And then of course our mask now theoretically should then expand and grow, but as you can see, it's not grown at a consistent point, so there's now points where that fits at that next keyframe, but I then have to go back into this and then add other points to try and make this, so like I'd have to go to Command and drag that down and so on and so on, and it's a bit of a pain, isn't it? So instead of that, what I'm going to do is use one of my favorite tools in After Effects. This is the Roto brush. So instead of using the standard mask and doing it manually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow After Effects to do it for me. So this is the Roto brush tool, and it's been updated recently because it's been used for various sort of effects on TikTok and what have you, the kind of thing where you get like text moving behind people and what have you. Because you're asking After Effects to do it, it really only works well if you've got a person or a subject or whatever which is in contrast to a background. So we'll see what that looks like in a minute on the green screen. But what I'm going to do for this first one is just show you how it operates. So you click on it, and of course the first thing you need to do is you need to go into the layers panel, because you're actually affecting the clip itself. Okay, I can turn off this second one by the way now, because I don't need it anymore as a reference, because I'm going to be asking After Effects to do this for me. So I've got my Rotobrush tool selected, I can double click, and now I'm in my layers panel. And what you do is, first of all, you just draw your green line around as close to the edge but inside the edge that you want to find as possible. And then After Effects goes, oh, is this the edge you want? And it basically highlights it with this nice pink line. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, yep, that looks pretty handy to me. So if I'd gone outside the line, like so, right, and it's saying, oh, you want this bit of pink included, and I'd made that mistake, or if it had just not figured it out properly, what I can do is I can hold down the the Option key on my keyboard, okay, and I can move across this and say, no, no, don't want that. And so you move across that bit, and you basically just say, no, like so. So I'm going to delete that. Okay, so I can get this closer to that line. There you go, and get this closer to that line, like that. Okay. And if I go too far, like so, then it's the simple tool. You just get the green one and you just go, no, 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 no. I want it to be here. And then it should theoretically find the edge of your shape. Okay, like so. Yeah, but because obviously I'd overdone it anyway, I'm just going to undo that all back to where it was, because it had figured it out nicely in the first place. Okay, and then what you do, like so, and then what you do is you literally just hit spacebar and you play it through, and it will take a while, particularly if it's a complicated thing that it's trying to track, like a person with hair and what have you. I'll show you the hair technique in a second, but you can see what's happening is, instead of me having to do this all by hand, it's looking at my amorphous shape and it's going, oh yeah, no, I get it now. You want to kind of cut out these undulating edges, and so I don't need to use my rotoscoping tool with the Bezier handles and everything, because my Rotobrush is doing it for me. So I can go through that and I can kind of just say, yep, okay, I think that's working nicely. What it's going to be doing is, unlike, and this is where it's important to understand the difference, unlike a color key, what it's doing is it's cutting off all of the extra footage that you don't need. All right, so yeah, that's looking pretty good. Okay, if we come back to our original video, then our composition, we can now see that that's now nicely on an alpha channel. Okay, so it's created that nice alpha channel background. There's a couple of bits where I can see a little bit of white, but you know, for our purposes in this case, it's not too much of a problem. And again, if I drag my star background underneath, so yeah, you can see there's some of the white background there, which you could refine if you want to. Okay, but that's the principle of roto brushing, is that it will do it all for you. Okay, so let's look at this in context of something which isn't just a moving shape. Okay, let's come back to our project and let's go to so this, we've looked at this one as a actually I'll just quickly show you something else that you can do with a mask before we get on to, no, I'll come back to that in a second, mask tracking, because that's the final thing. I'm going to stick with the Rotobrush tool for now. So here's my another image of me in front of the green screen, and I'm going to drag that down onto my new comp. So there's my composition. So here I am last year standing in front of the green screen, and on purpose I've made a clothing mistake, which some of you may already have picked up on, which I'm wearing a top which has green in it, which obviously is going to be a problem, because if I start trying to take out green, then that might start to go away. So if I click on this and bring my key light, for example, plus spill suppressor over onto this clip, and I say, yeah, I want this green here, it's all very well, but look what's happened. I've now got this transparent issue with my top, you know, which obviously isn't ideal. And the other thing which has happened, of course, is that while it's taken away most of the green, it hasn't taken away these other elements like the light in the ceiling and this bar, and there's some artifacting behind as well, which it hasn't done brilliantly. Whereas what you can do is, because in front of a green screen you are obviously offering very good contrast for After Effects to work with, if you've got time, you can then do a Rotobrush effect on a clip like this to get a cleaner edge. Okay, so what I'm going to do is come to my Rotobrush tool, double click, and on this instance, because I know that my arms are going to be I'm going to be moving my arms around, I can use this this opening shot to help me to tell the Rotobrush tool what shape I want it to be. So I'm going to start by no. I'm going to start by drawing around my head, and then what I'm going to do is come all the way down to there and then back up. Okay, so I'm saying, look, there's a gap here and I want you to find this gap each time. Okay, I've purposefully left my feet off because I want to do some fettling a bit later on just to show you how I'm going to do it. Okay, so it doesn't have to be particularly accurate. All you're doing is you're saying, look within this approximate shape, and this is what we want. So there's our line. Okay, now it hasn't figured out this bit. Okay, so what I might do now is go into the option and just go, no, I don't want this bit, so I'm going to draw a red line in there, and now it's gone. Oh right, I get you, you want a gap there. Okay, and it's the same over here, so it's found the edge of my feet, but it hasn't found this bit, so there's still plenty of green here, so I'm going to go, no, I want you to go up like that, and then it's going to hopefully figure it out. So nice tight on the old leg there, so I can zoom in. Now, because it's a person and that person is going to be moving, you're not going to get it precisely all the way around. Okay. One little tip that you can do is round more complicated areas, particularly with somebody who's got longer hair. The other tool that you can use within the Rotobrush, if I zoom in a bit more and drag it down, remember holding down space to drag. If I hold down my mouse button on this, we can get the Refine Edge tool. And as I say, this is particularly good if you're trying to work with somebody with longer hair, because obviously that's kind of quite fine and difficult to key. Is I can literally just go around this and go, by the way, there is an edge here that I want you to find around this guy's head. Okay, and within this whole area here, I want you to process this edge more closely, more finely. So what's going to happen is it's going to think about it and it's going to go, right, okay, in a negative, here's the edge of the face, here's what I found. So if I had longer hair, you'd see all those wisps of hair as a sort of negative. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back out now and I'm going to say, yep, that's fine, that's pretty much what I'm after. Okay, and now I'm going to hit my space bar and it will start to work out my Rotobrush tool, and I'll speed this up so we can come back to it in a minute and we can see what we've got. Okay, okie dokie. So here's I've shortened mine just for the purposes of this tutorial to like 5 seconds just so you can see, but yeah, so there's my Rotobrush now has cut away all the background. You can see what's happened though is that it points, but as I've been moving around there's still some green in there. So you can depends on how, you know, what it looks like. I mean, obviously the first thing you can do is if you've got a nice kind of clean look but you just want to kind of, you can see how it's kind of got slightly chewy at the edges here. Let's say, you know, you wanted to do that, you could just smooth some of that off by just feathering some of those edges a little bit, just smooth a little bit, you know, that sort of thing. You know, and there's a number of different ways that you can kind of, you know, adjust your parameters for your Rotobrush. But I think the other thing you can do though, of course, because you've got these little bits of green here and stuff like that, so I've paused it on a particularly bad bit, you know, to get rid of this sort of green halo around the edge and all that sort of thing, is now I could use my key light and drag that across onto it, and I can now click on that green, and so obviously now I've got rid of all that green tone, but now my body's gone a bit transparent. But if you now just come back to alpha contrast and just dial that back up a bit, you know, then you can end up with something that looks pretty good. So that's sort of, yeah, I think about 50%, that's, you know, looking okay. You're still going to get, because I was stood in front of a green screen, you're still going to get these bits of green glow. You know, a way you can do that is actually you can actually find those bits of green glow and then desaturate them, so at least they're not green, you know, so they're just basically colorless. But effectively what we've got now is we've got something where we've rotoscoped around the edge of our character to get rid of all the other ancillary bits that were in the scene, and we've also used the key light just to get rid of any kind of edge flashing of green edges and that sort of thing. And what will happen is when you apply that key light effect, so the key light effect is something that you've already used the Rotobrush on, it will then repropagate the edges based on the fact that it said, oh yes, right, you want that edge as well. Like you want to take out those sort of green edges in key light, and then it works in conjunction with the key light effect to then produce, you know, a nice final key. So yeah, so that's a way of doing it, you know. Again, with a bit of refinement, you know, you can kind of refine those edges down a little bit, but you can kind of see what we're getting. There's obviously these little bits of green amongst the hands as well, and I could perhaps go in then with a, if I particularly wanted to get rid of those, I could go in with my pen tool and mask that out, you know. But that's you know, that's something that you can then go in and figure out finally. But yeah, ultimately, yeah, that's not looking too bad. And obviously we've still also managed to maintain, you know, a reasonable representation of the green on our character's top. It's interesting, you'll find that if you're watching something like, let's say, Match of the Day, for example, around in November, you know, when everybody's wearing poppies, you'll see that the poppies on Match of the Day have got brown leaves rather than green leaves, just because it's much easier to key it out. Otherwise you end up with problems because the person's got green leaves on their poppy, which are a similar shade of green to the backdrop that they colour key in front of, you know. So obviously they'll make special poppies which have got like brown leaves and that sort of thing, so that you don't get those issues. Anyway, so that's our Roto brush effect on our character, and you can see that we've got a reasonably good key now, despite the fact that I purposefully shot that to have some problems with it, you know, with the green top and bad lighting and everything else, you know. But as I say, you know, the Roto brush effect is very, very useful, and you can do it outside in front of all sorts of backgrounds, just as long as you've got, let's say your character's wearing a white jacket and they're in front of a red brick wall, it'll work brilliantly, you know. I mean, it's exactly that sort of thing. But if they're wearing a white jacket in front of a white wall, it's not going to work so well, you know. And then at that point, then you would have to sort of start using your the rotoscoping tools instead. Okay, so the final thing, if you want to then use this in a different composition, is obviously I've set the composition here to match this, and that's one thing to say about the Roto brush, is it does need, if we drag this clip onto another clip, let's say you know, a standard 1920 by 1080 clip in a different frame rate, it wouldn't work very well. Okay, so you have to make sure that After Effects knows the frame rate and everything of the clip that it's trying to use the Roto brush tool on in order for it to work properly. So the best thing to do is to kind of go, okay, I've used my Roto brush, I've got a nice clean key on this one now. Now I'm going to render this out on an alpha channel and then import that into another project. And the way that we do that is, if we go to composition and add to render queue, what we need to do is we need to go into lossless and find a codec that allows us to change this channel from RGB to RGB plus alpha. So that's red, green and blue for the person, plus alpha, which is the alpha channel. So what it'll basically do is it'll output this a little bit like a PNG image with a transparent background, okay, except that of course it's video. So if we output it as the animation codec, it's going to be pretty big. But of course, if you look at something like, let's say, Apple ProRes 422 and click OK, the problem with this is that it doesn't give us that alpha channel. You know, we can render out one or the other, but we can't do both. So, you know, normally when you do this, it is quite a large file. It's just one of those things. But of course, you know, if you're just using it once, you can then import it into your other clip, and then once you've finished that project, you can just get rid of that source file, you know, if it's taking up lots of space on your computer. But yeah, you know, it's one of those things where that's an option if you want to export it with RGB plus alpha and then import it into the next one. Okay, so the final thing that I just want to go over in this video, and thank you for bearing with me with this one, because I appreciate it's not a huge amount of us like actually doing a project. We'll do that in the next video. The final thing I just want to look at is an interesting technique that you can use, where if I get this clip again and drag this down onto here, okay, what I can do is I can mask my character and then use this as a point for a tracker. Okay, so what I can do is I can get my pen tool and I can mask around him quite loosely, like so. And then what I can do is I can open up my clip and go into mask, and if I right click on that mask, I can then go to track mask. And so now my tracker has turned into something to analyze this mask. So because I know that I'm getting closer to him and I'm moving around, I'm going to select position, scale and rotation, and then just like I do with normal motion tracking, I can click advance forward, and then it will advance frame by frame, and it will go, all right, I get it, this thing within this mask, I need to track that and go where it goes. Okay, And that's useful. Now, one thing which is frustrating about After Effects, and which I think they will probably update at some point, is you can't then use that in the way that you can with normal motion tracking to then attach text to and things like that. You can get plugins that will do that, but you can't actually do that itself. So it's not as though you can then take a piece of text saying James and attach it to this track and then it will just stick, unfortunately. I'm sure they're going to update that at some point. As I say, there is a plugin you can buy that will allow you to do that, but for now what it basically does is it sort of will do things like, if we track this through to the end, then you'll find that let's say, I don't know, let's say for example we wanted to take this guy's identity out, let's say. So we're going to go onto our blur and sharpen. Okay, and then we can go on to, like, I don't know, Gaussian blur, let's say, and drag this onto here, and then I can go into my effect controls and up the blur, like so. And of course at the moment that's not really going to do much, but if I then take my project and grab this video and drag it down underneath, now I've got a blurred person, so now I can't see their identity. I can just see, you know, I can obviously adjust my blur, you can see that's me, obviously, can't you? But you know what I mean. You might not want to do the whole person though. What you might want to do for that kind of identity blurring effect is, if I take that away, like so, I could then go on to, oops, no, I really need to redo that, hold on. I'll just mask it out again quickly. So if I mask around this person like so, then what I can do is, instead of position, scale and rotation, I can actually go on to face tracking outline or face tracking detailed features. So it'll find the person's eyes or whatever. For our perspective, I'll just do outline only. And now it'll track and it'll literally just grab the person's face, he says. Why hasn't it done that? Bear with me. Let's try a different track. So I'll track around the whole person, so it knows it's a person. Now we're going to do face tracking. How interesting. There we go. Now it's figured it out. Here we go. I don't know why it took its sweet time figuring that out, but anyway, it did it eventually. So what we can do then is do the same thing. I can apply my Gaussian blur to this clip. I can blur just the guy's face, and then if I come back to my project and drag the source video underneath, now as we play it through, you can see the person, but their face is blurred. And of course, as we're getting closer, that amount of blur isn't working. So what I would do then for something like this, let's say, is if I wanted to do that, I would start here with the amount of blur, and I would say blurriness, turn on the stopwatch for that amount of blur at this point. Okay, because if I overdo it on this small bit, then you'll be able to see his face because it'll be too opaque. So I'm going to bring it down to like that, 38. But then by the time we get to here, that's not sufficient amount of blur, so now I'm going to up the ante and blur him out a bit more. Okay, I might want to move these bits out as well, just to make sure that you're not seeing too many edges of the face, like that. So that's our track, like that. Okay, and now you can say, right, here's our blur, like so. So that's just a sort of a simple way of tracking something like a face to apply an effect like that to, or you could use pixelation or whatever. Okay, so that's just an interesting tool that you can use with masks as well, as we're talking about masks today. Okay, so I think I'll call it a day with that one then. And now what we'll do is, in the final video, I shall take you through moving that mask around as a sort of mask path, and then you can go and shoot your own stuff. Okay, I shall see you in the next one.